Hello, today is Sunday, June 26th, 2026. Or is it June 28th? June 28th. Sorry, I misread my calendar. June 28th, 2026. And I'm going to read from a couple of different meditations from the Center for Action and Contemplation from Richard Rohr. Wrote kind of rotating around the concept of hope. Um, I think it was a good week for those meditations that the CAC put out, because it can seem hopeless um, in so many parts of the world for so many different kinds of people. So I'm going to read some excerpts from a couple of different ones and then talk about them. The first I'll be reading from is Hope is a Discipline, and it was from Thursday, June 25th. And the writers from the CAC write, organizer and activist Miriam Kaba reflects on hope as a discipline. And Kaba writes, for me, hope doesn't preclude feeling sadness or frustration or anger or any other emotion that makes total sense. Hope isn't an emotion, you know. Hope is not optimism. The idea of hope being a discipline is something I heard from a nun many years ago who was talking about it in conjunction with making sure we were of the world and in the world. Living in the afterlife already in the present was kind of a form of escape. But it was really, really important for us to live in the world and be of the world. The hope that she was talking about was this grounded hope that was practiced every day. I bowed down to that. I heard that many years ago, and then I felt the sense of, oh my God, that speaks to me as a philosophy of living, that hope is a discipline and that we have to practice it every single day. Because in the world we live in, it's easy to feel a sense of hopelessness, that everything is all bad all the time, that nothing is going to change ever. I understand why people feel that way. I just choose differently. I choose to think a different way, and I choose to act in a different way. I choose to trust people until they prove themselves untrustworthy. Jim Wallace, who people know as a liberal evangelical, talks about the fact that hope is really believing in spite of the evidence and watching the evidence change. And that to me makes total sense. I believe ultimately that we're going to win because I believe there are more people who want justice, real justice, than there are those who are working against that. And then the CAC writers write, Kaba describes how short-term thinking prevents us from accessing hope. I take a long view, understanding full well that I'm just a tiny little part of a story that already has a huge antecedent and has something that is going to come after that. I'm definitely not going to be even close to around for seeing the end of it. That also puts me in the right frame of mind. That what I'm doing is actually pretty insignificant in world history, but if it's significant to one or two people, I feel good about that. I talk to a lot of young organizers. I'm always telling them, your timeline is not the timeline in which movements occur. Your timeline is incidental. Your timeline is only for yourself to mark your growth and your living. But that's a fraction of the living that's going to be done by the universe, and that has already been done by the universe. When you understand that you're really insignificant in the grand scheme of things, then it's a freedom, in my opinion, to actually be able to do the work that's necessary as you see it and to contribute in the ways that you see fit. And the second one I'm going to read is also from the Center for Action and Contemplation. And I'm just going to read an excerpt from it. And it's entitled The Prime Motive of Love, and it came on Friday, the day after the first one I just read. And it opens with a quote from Even if hope fails, from Brian McLaren, even if hope fails, something bigger can replace it, and that is love. And the CAC writers write, Brian McLaren suggests that love can serve as a deep source of hope that is not dependent on outcome. You see the connection there with that previous one. It's not looking for a timeline or solutions or an end, but just living in the moment. McLaren writes, if we can see a likely path to our desired outcome, we have hope. If we can see no possible path to our desired outcome, we have despair. If we are unsure whether there is a possible path or not, We keep hope alive, but it remains vulnerable to defeat if that path is closed. When our prime motive is love, a different logic comes into play. We find courage and confidence, not in the likelihood of a good outcome, but in our commitment to love. Love may or may not provide a way through to a solution to our predicament, but it will provide a way forward in our predicament, one step into the unknown at a time. Sustained by this fierce love, as my friend Jackie Lewis calls it, we may persevere long enough that, to our surprise, a new way may appear where there had been no way. At that point, we will have reasons for hope again. But even if hope never returns, we will live by love through our final breath. To put it differently, even if we lose hope for a good outcome, we need not lose hope of being good people, as we are able, courageous, wise, kind, loving, in defiance of all that is bad around us. We feel arising within us this sustained declaration. We will live as beautifully, bravely, and kindly as we can, as long as we can, no matter how ugly, scary, and mean the world becomes, even if failure and death seem inevitable. In fact, it is only in the context of failure and death that this virtue develops. That's why Richard Rohr describes this kind of hope as the fruit of a learned capacity to suffer wisely and generously. You come out much larger, and that largeness becomes your hope. Lots of things went through my mind as I was reading these two in conjunction with one another. And one of the things that sprung to my mind was remembering the movie from I think it was the late 1990s, Life is Beautiful. Benigni, I think, was the guy who wrote it, directed it, and acted in it. And the basic story is of an Italian Jew who is placed in a concentration camp with his young son, and he hides his young son, and he helps his young son avoid the horrors of the concentration camp. This is Nazi concentration camp during World War II. By kind of convincing his son that there's a game involved, and he does certain things to gain points, and he loses points if he reacts in certain ways. But he's always, despite the horrors that are around them, Benigni is always hopeful and tries to be happy in front of his young son and inspire hope for him when there was no hope. I mean, they had no idea when any of that would end, or what ultimately would be the end of them, possibly, but just lived in a discipline of hope each and every day. And these readings reminded me of that, and reminded me that hope isn't, as Kaba mentioned, isn't an emotion. It's not optimism. It's just living in the presence. And as Brian McLaren said, living in love, in essence, in each moment. And I find this, in a way, very affirming of the Buddhist thought of living in the moment, not worrying about the past, not worrying about the future, but simply focusing on the moment. And it also reminded me of something I've often said: you find what you look for. So look for love, transmit love, be love. You never know what action you take, what impact it might have on someone else. And it's good for me to be reminded of that, because I can be just as bad as the next person in doom scrolling through Facebook and finding horrible things that have happened and reposting them, and just promoting fear and dread and despair about the future, rather than living in the moment in hope and care. I was also reminded that I just lost my train of thought because the doorbell rang. Also reminded that we we live in it is living in the moment, when we, even Christianity, so many people in Christianity look upon the next life focusing on the next life and individual performance rather than living in community, which is just the wrong approach, I think. Even Jesus's life was always about community and building community and growing together, and how we relate to one another. It was not about personal salvation, which there's just far too many Christians or people who call themselves Christian in the United States that is their only focus, is saving themselves for the next life and trying to save others so they can have a good next life, which while totally ignoring this life. And that's wrong. So um, let hope be a discipline, let love be a discipline, and live your life in the moment. Look for the good in the world and be the good in the world. Be love in the world. Be hope in the world. Um, and I know it's difficult sometimes, but the more you the more you train yourself to be that way, it becomes the core of who you are, and it helps build community. Anyway, those were the thoughts I had looking through this, and I hope it gives you something to think about, and I hope that um, it gives you a chance to pull yourself away from the despair that's in the world and focus on hope and try to create little pockets of love and hope, because you never know who might need to hear um, or see or witness or feel from you something that will keep them focused on the good in themselves and the good in others. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Lots of rambling. I hope that gives you something to think about, and hope to talk to you again soon.